Hello, I'm State Representative Mike Duffey from the 21st House District. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm today's host, Dustin Russell. We have with us today State Representative Mike Duffey, who serves the 21st House District, which includes Worthington, Worthington Hills, Northland, Minerva Park, and portions of Columbus. Thank you for joining us, State Representative.
Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. It's your first term. Probably a lot of people around the district who doesn't know who you are.
Yep, I'm a freshman legislator, formerly a two-term Worthington City Council member. Grew up in Worthington and been in the district my entire life, and that was one of the kind of unique things, having been raised in the district, having seen the way that it's changed over so many years.
Great. So there's probably not a whole lot about the district you don't know about.
Pretty much. I mean, I grew up in Worthington, but back in the day, the places where you shopped were Northland Mall, Worthington Square Mall, and we've seen the changes that have occurred there over the past 20 years. And that's really one of the things that drove me to run for this office.
And your community has grown like most of the other communities surrounding Columbus in the last 10 years.
Well, in some ways, yes. More density a little bit, but also you have to think about the fact that we're what's called a first ring inner suburb. And so most of our development occurred post-World War II. And so now it's a question of smart growth. Can we get the jobs to come back to the older communities rather than just going further out?
And you served on City Council.
City Council in Worthington, 2 terms.
What inspired you to run for that office?
I think young people need to get involved. Oftentimes I think people are afraid to run for office when they're 18 years old or 20, as the case was when I first ran, 23 years old. But if you're really passionate about it, I think it's an underrepresented segment of the population. You should get involved, do it. Don't ask permission to run for office, just do it.
So I'm sensing a pattern here of public service with you and your family, perhaps.
My family has been involved. My father was a judge, 10th District Court of Appeals here in Franklin County. That's State Court of Appeals. He was also on Worthington City Council for 18 years. Interestingly, most of my family history is Democratic, and I'm a Republican. So we have a very bipartisan family. We get along, and I think that gives me a unique perspective in the legislature.
Okay, so you're serving on the Worthington City Council, and you decide, I want to run for state representative. What went through your mind in that decision?
Well, I kind of got recruited a little bit. It wasn't something that I had ambitions to do, but there's a cause in that there's so much going on in the state of Ohio right now, and so you can either not get involved or you can get involved, and I elected to get involved when I was asked to do so.
It's kind of like lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be part of this. It's an important time. Obviously, you're one of 99 people in the House. Then there's 33 senators on top of that. So there's always the fear that you just become a small piece of a larger machine. But I think this particular year and this biennium, with the issues that are facing Ohio, there's going to be some real opportunity to create lasting change and the right kind of improvement. The things that aren't what people do for their own self-interest, but I may take some hits for some of the decisions, but hopefully they're the right decisions for Ohio for the long term. And that's really my focus, long term.
Important time in Ohio's history right now, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think it's perhaps the most important in generations.
What about the 21st District is unique from the other 98 districts that comprise the Ohio House?
I would call it mostly urban to suburban district, but fully developed. And so it's a mature community. Worthington population 10 years older than the average population in Franklin County. Northland, same kind of thing. Housing stock, commercial stock, mostly post-World War II. And so now it's reaching that cusp of having gone through the boom years, and now it's kind of in a trough in a sense. And so we see a lot of exodus of jobs, older buildings, and we're grappling with how do you revitalize older neighborhoods. And we know that the model exists because when you look at the Short North, or you look at German Village in Columbus, or you look at other places in other cities in Ohio, you know that they will turn around eventually, and I want to be part of accelerating that for northern Franklin County.
Some pretty good issues there on infrastructure for your district. What
Absolutely.
else the 21st District is kind of important issues-wise that you noticed in the last year working for this job?
Well, the phase out of the tangible personal property tax is going to have a pretty severe impact on Worthington School District. I think it has impacts on all school districts in Ohio, but particularly so for Worthington. They're estimating 8 more mills in terms of property taxes necessary unless we hold them harmless in the future, and that's going to be very difficult with the current budget. The evidence-based model had instituted a kindergarten mandate, all-day kindergarten mandate. The school district previously was charging for that. That was a workable system. People were pretty satisfied with paying for it. And if you were on free or reduced lunch, you were getting it for free. Right now, as it's currently written, unless the law changes, Worthington Schools is looking at shutting down kindergarten next year. And you've got parents that right now are trying to schedule kindergarten for next year. They're wondering what things are going to do. So the faster that we can come to some resolution on that, and I'm for eliminating that mandate, and I think House Bill 30 is going to achieve that for us. It's just a question how fast we can get that done as a vehicle. But, you know, you've got a workable system. People don't want a lot of disruption. I think we're going to see an increasing focus in the legislature on removing mandates from local government, empowering them to make the decisions as we all cope with kind of a tightened budgetary cycle.
So, you know, it is a partnership between the state and the local governments, and you recognize
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, you know, we're kind of nibbling around the edges here legislatively. Yeah. We'll get to the one big piece of legislation that you shepherded through later on here, but some of the other duties of a state representative, you know, it's more than just showing up, obviously. Maybe kind of share with us a typical day, if there is a such thing here at the State House.
Well, one thing I'm learning so far is that, you know, it's kind of a joke that I'm always there because I've made this my full-time job. It's my focus right now. I'm there Monday through Friday. I'm getting there in the morning as soon as I drop off Jack at the daycare. And typically, you know, reading co-sponsor requests, I'm only a freshman, so I'm learning the process, but you're getting 5 or 10 co-sponsor requests a day. So you're reading other people's legislation, their explanation of it, and trying to find out if that's a bill that you can get behind. We're getting constituent mail, an increasing amount within the past few days with the introduction of Senate Bill 5, with Jobs Ohio, with other things that are going on. Numerous meetings throughout the day, whether it's the Social Work Association or Automobile Dealers Association, or whether it's local government, or in the evenings I'm going to Worthington School Board meetings, giving them a report on what's going on with House Bill 30 and the legislature. Constantly meeting with people, and I think the challenge is if you have something that you're passionate about, you know, finding time that you can research it on your own and then work on a bill of your own, because so many other people are going to come to you with ideas that you need to find time to pursue your own ideas as well.
A lot of moving parts. Yeah. What's a common theme maybe that you're hearing out in the district?
You know, don't cut us, basically. And then the common theme and the response, I think, from the entire legislature is, okay, but help us understand how we can balance the equation. Because the other side of it is we're either going to have to find revenue or we're going to have to find something else to cut. And it's always about priorities. And so we just urge them to think outside the scope of whatever particular industry or sector or interest they're talking about and say, you know, globally, think about the budget and where that money would come from if that's your cause. Or figure out ways so that we can save you money so that knowing that cuts are inevitable, we can offset the pain a little bit.
Got it. Okay, so now you're on committees. That's how a lot of the work is done in the General Assembly, right?
Absolutely.
And you're on, I think, 4 committees and kind of 1 special committee.
2 special.
2 special committees. Okay, your list is better than mine. Why don't you tell the people of your district what assignments you have specifically?
I'm on finance, financial institutions, housing and urban development, which is 1 committee. Finance is a separate one, but financial, housing, and urban development's 1. Health care committee, I think it's health and aging, and then local government. And then I'm also on JCAR, which is the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, and then I'm on the Commission for Minority Health.
Okay, so now let's start at the top. Finance and appropriations. What kind of purview does that committee have for the people out there that may not know what that means?
Deciding where the money goes, essentially the budget. And of course, I know that you're very involved in that, and I'm on the 13th floor right next to Chairman Omstutz, the chairman of the committee. We're going to be working on the biennial budget and deciding, you know, who gets funded, who doesn't get funded. And I think that is the meat of what the legislature does, because when you assign a dollar figure to something, you're really assigning a prioritization to it.
Okay, and you mentioned the health and aging committee that you serve, and then earlier on you mentioned the demographics of your district. So how does that mesh?
I think, increasingly we're looking for ways, as the baby boomer population ages and you start to see people going in the nursing homes. My parents faced that same situation. I lost both of my parents last year, and my father spent 2 years in a nursing home. We recognize that a great deal of our money is going to the final years of people's lives, and yet 80% of the people that we're helping, I believe, on Medicaid are children. And so how do we kind of align more of it towards prevention and less of it of the expense to the state and to the population, the taxpayers as a whole, to end-of-life care, because that can just get dramatically more expensive, and it's going to be I think Medicaid's been called the Pac-Man of the budget before, that it's going to gobble up everything else, and that's increased so dramatically over the past several decades.
Now, you mentioned kind of a funny-sounding committee, the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review. Yeah. How many people have heard of that? Raise their hands. Nobody.
Yeah, it's unusual.
What's kind of the 30,000-foot view of that one?
Yeah, well, in between laws, there's a lot of space for agencies to figure out rules and regulations on how to implement those statutes. And so the question is, are those rules consistent with the legislative intent of the General Assembly? And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. The Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review really allows the legislature, the People's House, to have a direct control over what rules are implemented. As long as they're within the scope of the law, we're going to approve them. We only have 4 criteria that we can approve them on, disapprove them on. And so we have a very limited purview, but we want to make sure that it's consistent with what the legislature always intended when they passed that bill. And so in some sense, it's a check and balance over the executive branch.
So the committee part of your duties when you're in legislative session is most of your day, I would imagine.
Yeah, most of the middle of the week, obviously, and then the Mondays and Fridays towards the end of the week, sometimes a little bit on Tuesday and Thursday. You're going to be having those constituent meetings, those interest group meetings, that kind of thing, the associations. Well,
now that people know what you do and briefly what you do around here, and I'm sure over the next year and a half they'll learn more, how can someone in the 21st District who's listening to this, who says, you know what, I want to tell Representative Duffey what's on my mind. What's the best way? Well, obviously the most direct way is if they see you out at a town hall meeting or something. But how do they call your office? What's email, phone? What's the best way?
It really depends on what is easiest for them. The phone number is area code 614-644-6030, and they can call that. They're going to reach my legislative aide, Bridget Harrison. She's going to be in the office most days, when you call, whereas I might be out, like you said, in a committee and may not be able to pick up the phone. So that's going to make sure that you get the promptest response and that it's in our file. We know that we're going to follow up with you. Also, it's always good to put things in writing, because then we know specifically what you're asking for. We can follow up on the specific questions, and we've got a record of that. And that's how we like to correspond too, because then we can provide a letter back and you can know that the case is closed.
And your office may not be able to solve everyone's problem, but you'll certainly get them pointed in the right direction.
Exactly. Probably half the inquiries that we've had so far are something related to something that they're dealing with that's federal, or that the legislature doesn't directly handle, but we have kind of the red phone that we can get on and talk to somebody that's a legislative liaison in one of the state agencies, and they're going to follow up on that case, and they're going to make sure that it's handled professionally.
Got it. Okay, now, the big piece of legislation that you've been working with primarily, House Bill 1. It's been talked about around the state, the importance of economic development and job growth and retention and all of those issues that kind of culminated last year. So can you give your constituents kind of an overview of this? It was House Bill 1, so that in alone ought to tell you how important it was.
Well, clearly the Speaker, the Governor, the entire legislature, and state government have put jobs as the top priority for Ohio. And to put it in context, we know that right now we're below the median per capita income among the 50 states. We know that we're below on population growth. We know that we're below on job growth. So something's not working in Ohio, and it hasn't been working for a while. And the new governor, John Kasich, has really found a very talented individual in Mark Kwame, a person who came from venture capital world, has worked in the private sector, understands, the catchphrase right now, which is the speed of business. And he's done a preliminary analysis of the Ohio Department of Development, and one of the conclusions that he came to was that we have about 60 employees out of 400 plus employees that are actually focused on the core mission of what the Ohio Department of Development originally was created to do, and that is job attraction and retention. And so over the years, the legislature, like it is wont to do, will, people have different programs, and I can kind of think of it as a Christmas tree. Everyone wants to hang their ornament on it. Well, sometimes it can get a little bit too cluttered. And so now that's the problem with the Ohio Department of Development. There's a lot of bureaucracy, there are a lot of programs. The director is pulled in a lot of different directions. We want that director to be focused, and we want 100% of the staff's time to be focused on job attraction and retention. So how do we achieve that? Well, the idea is we don't want to be just another public agency. We want to do this in a different way. And Jobs Ohio creates a nonprofit organization that can move more quickly, that can be nimble, and have that insight and tap into the business community expertise. And it's been greatly supported. We've had testimony from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, from the Columbus Partnership. The list goes on in terms of the amount of business community and groups that have said, this is the right thing to do, we need to do this now. And what House Bill 1 does is it's simply an authorization bill. It's the beginning of a multi-phase process by which we will get to that goal of what we're talking about. First thing it does is it appropriates money from the existing budget. It's budget neutral. We don't want to spend more money right now in the state budget on even new programs. So we're finding ways to do it with the money that we currently have. Appropriates some money so that the director can do a 6-month review and start to get Jobs Ohio done. He's going to evaluate every component of the department, decide what needs to stay, what needs to go, and sometimes even what needs to be eliminated, and maybe what needs to be started. They may not be doing everything that they need to be doing. The second thing is it allows the governor to create a board. And within the anticipation that 6 months from now, Jobs Ohio will be fully fledged out, we want to make sure that we hit the ground running. And to do that, you need a board first, you need the articles of incorporation, you need the legal work, you need all the kind of nuts and bolts that will help them get started right away. And so knowing that all that work has to be done, we are going to take our time, make sure that we do the legislation correctly, which is why there's this 4 to 6 month period of review. But right now there are things that we can do now, and there's no excuse for us not to do them right now.
So the bill, though, itself moved fairly quickly through the Ohio House.
Yeah.
And that's been a point of contention. Maybe you could address that, because it seems like you've talked about here that it's an ongoing process.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to remember is that House Bill 1 does not eliminate the Ohio Department of Development. The Development Department continues. There are statutes that regulate everything that it does, all the programs, all the jobs. They just continue. We're working in parallel with that. So there's really no threat to the current programs or departments or anything that people might be interested in. It's just going to allow us to get a leg up on the future when we come back with future legislation, and Jobs Ohio really starts to sink its teeth into doing the work that it's supposed to be doing.
And it's cleared kind of the first hurdle in the legislative process.
Yep, it's gone through the House. We had over 15 hours of committee hearings and testimony. It went through 2 committees there. It went through House State Government. It also went through the Finance Committee. Now it's at the Senate. We gave sponsor testimony, I guess, 2 days ago in the Senate Finance Committee. They asked a lot of good questions. Proponent and opponent was yesterday, and hopefully they'll move quickly on it.
And clearly the opportunity to weigh in on this legislation is still welcome.
Absolutely. In fact, I had a Democratic member of the legislature approach me the other day, had a very good idea about selling Ohio abroad, internationally. And he wanted to work with me on an amendment to this bill. And I said, yeah, absolutely, let's get together. We want to make sure that when people, this is a high-profile bill, I get that. And so sometimes the amendments are going to be politically charged, and sometimes they're just going to be genuine good faith amendments. I want to make sure that anybody that comes to me with a good faith, genuine amendment, that we're working with them and that we're trying to incorporate their idea. And if it can't be included in this bill, maybe we include it in future legislation.
Because that's the process. There's going to be more opportunity to weigh in on.
Absolutely. We got
Ohio.
Essentially 4 to 6 months. I mean, if you think about it this way, even though there won't be committee hearings again for future legislation until 4 to 6 months after this bill passes, it's almost like you're going to have 4 to 6 months of committee hearings on Jobs Ohio, because you're going to do the initial phase, then you're going to have all this discussion, all the stakeholder input, and then 6 months later you're going to have another session and more sponsor testimony, more proponent, more opponent, and then more drilling down into the details of everything that people really are truly interested in. Where the program's going to go, which programs are going to stay and go, which programs are going to be boosted, what's going to happen to the people that currently work there. All of that is going to come to pass, not now, but in 6 months. So in some sense, this is actually a very deliberative, slow, and conscious approach.
You touched on something that I think resonates with people while you were explaining this process, and that is working together with various people. Now, that's kind of the way the legislature works.
Yeah.
You work across the aisle. So is that something maybe you've kind of, I guess, learned a little bit through this process, the importance of that ideas can come from anywhere?
Yes, exactly. House Bill 30 is, as I spoke to earlier, was a very interesting bill. I didn't sponsor the bill. Representative Gardner did. I thought it was a great idea, but I was interested in it. I wanted to make sure that it did the right things for what my district needed. And so I approached the sponsor right away, and I called him up. And as a freshman, you try to learn, what is the process? Do I propose this amendment in committee? Do I propose it on the floor? Or do I call up the sponsor and have a nice little coffee chat? And 9 times out of 10, you can really get the most done by just talking to people. If you're polite to them, you say, I've got a really good idea, they're going to listen to you. And if it fits in their bill, 9 times out of 10, they're going to include it. If it doesn't fit in their bill, and they respect the way that you approach them about it, they'll talk to you about helping you with legislation separately in the future. And I think at times like this, it's especially important that we work with people on the other side. And I've never had that perspective that it's our party and their party. It's all of us working together for Ohio, and my family history bears that out. I just don't view the other side as the enemy, and I don't think the majority caucus does either. So it's going to be a challenge this year. I know that there are going to be a lot of different opinions on different topics, but we need to, where possible, try to reach across and try to do things in a bipartisan manner.
Probably the last question here. First term state legislature member of the High House. What's been the biggest surprise that's just kind of been an eye-opening experience?
Gosh, the biggest surprise. They say it's a part-time job, but it certainly feels like a full-time one, and then plus. Just trying to balance everything, having a family, having a baby, trying to spend time with my 10-month-old son, the amount of time that people genuinely put into things, and how many things are moving at the same time. When I was a reporter, I used to cover the legislature, and that's one of the other interesting things in my background. I worked for Hannah News Service, and I covered mostly the healthcare committees, and I found that to be a fascinating process. But I assumed, and I think many people in the general public assume, that being a legislator, that you know everything that's going on with everything else. And it really doesn't work that way. We're just like everybody else in that we know kind of the committees that we're on, you know a little bit about the bills that you're very interested in, but you have to rely on other people and their expertise, and that's why everyone has a role when everyone's doing their own thing.
So the people out there, the 21st District, call your office, email you,
yes,
talk about these
please.
Things. The ideas are just not set here in the Capitol, right?
Yep.
And
I'm excited. As soon as the weather breaks, it's my hope to get out on the streets again and to knock on some people's doors, because I want to approach some of the people, not just that will call our office, but I want to approach the people that they don't think to call their local government officials. And what if I knocked on their door and just asked their opinion? Let
me ask you one more question.
Yep.
How early has been your first meeting? I mean, because it isn't a 9-to-5 job.
7:30. 7:30 has been some of our earliest meetings, but the committee hearings typically start about 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Representative Duffey, for being here, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's certainly been a pleasure. You've been watching Ohio in Focus, the program that brings state government to you. Thank you for joining us.